Okay, we're going to begin. We're holding towards the end of the series about morality and bioethics. And tonight's topic is one of the more popular, perhaps, topics that deal with bioethics. And it's about euthanasia. Euthanasia is also known as mercy killing. But I would prefer to question that. Perhaps it's not necessarily mercy killing, it's merciless killing. We're dealing with a situation where people may be terminally ill or who are in great pain. And as a result of their pain, as a result of their situation, either the doctors or the family or they themselves have given up hope and would rather die. And they want to be assisted in dying, or at the very least, not to receive any additional help. Euthanasia, therefore, is about dying in a dignified manner, supposedly. Not in a painful way, in a prolonged and difficult way. And the question is this proper or not? Is this acceptable according to the Jewish law? This is really a big dilemma, not only for physicians, but for the family, for the patient. I'm not minimizing the problem. It is really a big dilemma, and it's nothing new. People have had to deal with this kind of question in the past. There are those, the proponents for euthanasia, that claim that people should have the right to die with dignity. And that's what you will pretty much hear, that it's their right. In speaking about rights, the Torah says, but wait a minute, we're limited to what we can do to ourselves and to others. Thou shalt not kill. Lo tirtzach. Even though there are exceptions to that law, at times of war, in self-defense, or in executing certain criminals. And even though there are times when martyrdom, when someone is willing to be a martyr, is condoned, that is only for very special situations when dealing with a certain cause, but never just to terminate life. Therefore, if we're dealing with assisting death, that is tantamount to a suicide. If we're dealing with an involuntary type of situation, where the patient is totally unaware, or he does not consent, does not give permission for this, then that is tantamount to murder. So what we're dealing with here, so far, is possibly either a form of suicide, which we'll speak about separately in a separate lecture, or something very close to murder, even though the intent is good. Even though we want to help, the law does not differentiate in murder whether the intent was to help or it was premeditated. Some might say that the law should differentiate. I mean, this is what the argument is all about, that some lines should be drawn as to what is acceptable and what is not. But it's very vague. It's not so simple, and many countries and states within the United States have different policies towards it. Various levels of tolerance towards this particular situation. What should our attitude be if someone nevertheless did it, took his life, couldn't handle the pain, sought assistance from a doctor to commit suicide? Regardless of how we call it, it is definitely something that deep down bothers every one of us. After all, we can all agree that some people are really going through a difficult time. He's terminally ill. Why prolong his misery, as some would say? We can definitely identify with that. We can even empathize with those individuals who are going through it and with the family members. But it's not so simple. And the reason why I chose to speak about this topic is, first of all, because this is a very relevant topic. There's pending legislation in California and elsewhere whether this should be legalized. But more than that, it is important for us to educate ourselves about the meaning of life, about the mission of the soul, and about the significance of pain and suffering in one's life. There are separate lectures about these topics. And if we educate ourselves about them, we will have a different approach, a different attitude. So, in some ways, I do agree that this topic is difficult to resolve in just a few words. It's not about a yes or no. Because in Judaism, halacha is what dictates. What does Jewish law have to say about such matters of life and death? It's not about sympathy, empathy, or feelings. We need to be very, very careful to follow halacha. And we don't have the time in this lecture to go into all the details of halacha. The details are not for this lecture. But the details do concern certain types of euthanasia more than others. In order to differentiate or to understand the various types of euthanasia, there are various definitions or perhaps categories that differentiate between the different types. So briefly, all I will say is that there's something called eugenics euthanasia, there's something called active, and there's something called passive euthanasia. Let's make it simple. 3 types. Eugenics we won't talk about so much because that was something practiced by the Nazis. Eugenics has to do with improving, supposedly improving the genes of future generations by eliminating those people that are crippled, that are not healthy. So that is an intentional euthanasia. It was directed towards eliminating those that are not wanted, those that do not contribute to society. No reason to talk about that. I think there's a consensus that that is terribly wrong and prohibited. But we need to differentiate a little bit more about passive and active. Active means that there's something being done to accelerate the death, even through medication. Very, very strong drugs that possibly will also alleviate the pain, but in the end, it will also bring about the individual's death sooner than it would have been had we left nature to take its course. Whereas passive means you don't do anything. In other words, the person has gotten some help in the past, the patient has been treated, but we don't do it anymore. We don't provide any more medication. We don't help the individual the way we did in the past. So by not helping, by not giving what was given in the past, we're holding back something that could possibly prolong his life. And instead, here, we're cutting it short. And some proponents, of course, will say, listen, we're not shortening this person's life. If he's very, very sick, we're shortening the act of dying. He's dying anyway. You see the difference? That is how they would look at it. If this is the case, that the person is dying anyway, that is the argument. We're not really shortening his life, which is wrong. We're shortening the act of dying. In Judaism, there is more of an emphasis or more discussion about passive euthanasia, not active. And don't think it's so simple. It's complex. There's all kinds of criteria involved here as to what can be done or not be done. It's not a simple matter. But in general, I will say that in Judaism, we don't easily assist an individual, even in a passive way. If there's any chance whatsoever, however remote, that he will live, we try our best to save his life. We do our best to help him feel better. So this is not a very simple matter for anyone to take into their hands, to decide to terminate another individual's life only because we think that this is in their best of their interest. If anything, it shows a lack of understanding of what life is all about, and what God's plan and design for this individual is. So, without getting into halacha, what we need to do is to better understand this process. Why is there an argument to begin with, and how we should go about it? Judaism teaches that man has no title over his life or his body. You can't harm yourself. You cannot kill yourself. On the contrary, man has the responsibility to preserve his life and to dignify it. He must sustain himself. He needs to eat. He needs to sleep. He needs to take care of himself. And if he is sick, he needs to seek help to heal himself. The rabbis tell us that from the verse V'rapo Yerapeh, we learn that a doctor is given permission to heal. Very interesting. We would not know it otherwise. A doctor is given permission from above to heal. In other words, not only does he need to do his best to help people who are ill, but we naturally have to seek that kind of help if we're sick. Why would I think not? Well, there might be some people who are going to say, well, I'll just trust in God, whatever he wants. If he wants me to be sick, God forbid, that's the way it should be. No. A person naturally, al pi derech hateva, has to do his best to seek help, to preserve his health, even if it involves taking medication. As long as this medication, of course, is proven to be a good medication. We're not talking about being a guinea pig over here and testing out something that could do more damage than help. We're talking about proven medication, a doctor that knows what he's doing. He has a mandate. That's his responsibility to heal. And if he does his best to help individuals, he's actually performing a mitzvah. He's actually doing a good deed. There are those who are on a very high spiritual level that don't have to go to doctors. God helps them directly. Most people are not at that level. We need to make an effort and go and seek the help of a doctor and take whatever medication they advise us to take. But not to lose focus that ultimately it's up to God. So we continue to pray. So yes, there's permission to heal, but that does not mean that you stop praying. The two go very well together. In other words, we go to the doctor, but we don't think that the ultimate cure is going to come through his hands necessarily. It's going to come from God. He's just a messenger. And that is the Judaic belief, that doctor acts as a messenger from God, but ultimately, who decides who will live and who will die, who will be healed or who will remain ill? God. So, for that reason, we continue to pray and hope for the best. If the doctors, therefore, are to be sought, then why do the rabbis tell us in the Talmud something very, very puzzling? Tov shebarofim legehenom. That the best of doctors will end up going to Gehenom, to hell. That's a very negative remark to say about a doctor, that the best of doctors will end up going to Gehenom. What could they have done wrong to deserve something like that? On the contrary, we're talking about all the good that they're doing. So the explanation is that's only meant about the doctors who don't do their best, who couldn't care less, who are not sensitive to the patient, who think they know it all, who are overconfident. These are the doctors that may do more harm than good, and therefore they will end up going to Gehenom. That is why the Chozeh Melublin, a great sage who lived about 200 years ago, said that when the Torah says that the doctor has permission to heal, it meant that's all he has permission to do, is to heal. He has no permission to issue a sentence, a verdict. This man is helpless. He's terminally ill and he has no hope. That the doctor has no permission to say. You've been given permission to heal, and that's it. But to pronounce that this person is terminally ill, that you have no permission to do. Now you may wonder, why would the doctor do that anyway? Why would he say this person is helpless? He's basically dead. This is actually a tactic that proponents of euthanasia and others who don't value life are claiming. In order to get around the moral issues, we're talking about moral issues here, in order to get around it, they have to basically say, you know what, it's wrong to kill, it's wrong to assist somebody to die, but he's already dead. You see how they get around it? This is one way of getting around the problem. Well, we're talking about somebody right now who's pretty much dead. What will determine if he's dead or not? That is a whole discussion in itself. When do we consider somebody dead? As far as we know, as long as he's breathing, right? He's still alive. But he's anyway going to die. So what? It's not so simple, even for doctors. Why isn't that simple for doctors? Because even though they may consider this individual as terminally ill, supposedly, when they graduated, they accepted upon themselves something called the Hippocratic Oath. Have you heard about that? That is an old oath that doctors used to make in Greece, where they basically committed themselves to preserve and protect life and to relieve suffering. That's the commitment that they take upon themselves when they graduate. Well, is he going to do that now? He sees the patient, he's terminally ill. You see that there's a conflict here? This is part of the problem that many doctors have to deal with. Wait a minute, I'm supposed to do my best. So, if we consider him dead, it makes it, I guess, easier for the doctor to not make any more efforts. Why can't we allow doctors to decide? Why shouldn't doctors be able to decide what should happen with this patient? After all, they are experts in their field. And today, with all the technology and the tools that we have, they even have it almost, I say almost, to a precise science. They can tell you he's got 11 days to live. And you know what? Sometimes they're right, but many times they've been wrong.
They're wrong, yeah.
Doctors, as intelligent as they may be, regardless of how much experience they have, are liable to error. in their diagnosis. They have made mistakes. You know how many stories there are about individuals that doctors have given up hope on, and they remained alive for many years, not for a couple extra weeks, for many years. Tumors that disappeared, cancer that's gone away, people who were even in a coma who got out of the coma, and with no damage to their brain after having been submerged in water for who knows how long. There's all kinds of stories. The bigger problem, however, with allowing doctors to make certain decisions is that this is a very slippery slope. And that is what the opponents of euthanasia are rightfully saying. In other words, even if we agree that there may be sometimes some room to allow for passive euthanasia, which means that you don't help if he's anyway in a few more days going to die, that you don't go out of your way and do extraordinary things to try to reverse the situation when you know it's pretty much almost impossible. Still, it's a slippery slope. What that means is that if you give a finger, they take the whole hand. You know, you've heard of that. And what this could happen, or what this could result in, the consequences of giving in a little bit here, is that eventually what will happen is what has happened in the Netherlands, is that they've been very easygoing about euthanasia, and therefore many times they don't even ask for permission from the patient, even though he's fully awake, or don't ask for permission from the family members. In other words, after a while, the doctors, if they feel that they have all this power, they will be the ones making the decision. A decision of who will live and who will die? They will lose sensitivity. They will not care as much. If it requires too much effort to get special medication, expensive medication, they may not want to do it. Wait a minute, don't forget about the family members. Oh, he's almost dead, great. He has $500 million in the bank. Yeah, go ahead. Give him the medication that will accelerate his death. This is not a joke. It could easily happen. Oh, great. How many days did you say he has to go? Oh, 5 days is too much. Yeah. You see what I mean by a slippery slope? If you legalize it, if you make room for it, the system can lose control. Doctors may lose control. Family members may figure, well, it is perhaps the better way for him to go. It's a dignified manner, instead of him suffering with all these tubes, right, connected to a machine, a respirator, just disconnected. It's not so simple. What has happened today that people are more easy going about this? Why is today's generation more accepting of euthanasia than in the past? Very simple. People are living longer, and these sick people, according to some, are becoming a burden. It's straining the system. Insurance companies don't like it. Doctors are not so happy with it either, that they have to work and work and work. So, you see how many elements in society are eager to make things easier for themselves, even though it means that this human being, who was very active and productive and is no longer so active and productive, is about to die, and therefore, why stop it? Why try to gain a few extra days of life for him? They don't see any value in it. Let me tell you a story that happened in our community. I was called by one of the members that his sister was very, very ill in the hospital. And if she were to go ahead with tracheostomy, you know what that is? It's a surgery where they make a hole in the trachea to help her breathe. If they go ahead with that surgery, which really could help her, she may die. She was very, very weak, and any surgery may be to her detriment. In other words, the doctors were discouraging the family from going ahead with any surgery. Just leave her alone, they said to them. And even though if you leave her alone, she's obviously not going to make it. It would be too risky, they said, to make the surgery. So they asked me what to do. I said, first of all, don't listen to the doctors of this hospital. Go and find 3 opinions from doctors from a different hospital who are not biased. Right? Once you have several expert opinions, it is easier to evaluate the situation in an unbiased way. This hospital, the doctors that are in this hospital, may not be giving you the most objective advice. And what should we ask the doctors? We should ask those other doctors, what are the chances that this surgery could really help her stay alive for a good number of years? And the answer came back at least 50%. She has a chance. I said, 50%? You want to give up 50%? Now remember, this is not so simple because, obviously there is some element of risk involved. But if this means 50% chance of staying alive, and if you do nothing, it means for sure she won't make it, what do you do? I said the answer is pretty clear. She has a good chance to stay alive. They went ahead and did the surgery, and Baruch Hashem, she's fine. I mean, she's not 100% healthy. I'm sure she needs medication and she needs some help, but she's happy. She's enjoying her family. She can be around them. She's aware of her surroundings. Just to give up so quickly? Judaism looks at this in a very, very different manner because Judaism values even Chayei Sha'ah. Chayei Sha'ah means even temporary life, even momentary life. Even 1 minute of life is valued by Judaism. And the rabbis tell us, therefore, afilu goses, even if somebody is moribund. In other words, he's about to die. He's on his deathbed. He only has a minute to live, right? On his death throes, they say in English, right? You cannot accelerate his death. But it's only 1 minute away. 1 minute you take away from him, and you murdered him. Yes, 1 minute you took away from him. If you did anything directly or indirectly to bring about a quicker death, you've murdered him. Now, as a result of that, since Judaism values life so much, there are many halachot that are very clear that say, pikuach nefesh docha Shabbat, if somebody's life is in danger, you cancel, you push away the laws of Shabbat. Shabbat is holy, right? We don't do certain work on Shabbat. But if somebody's life is in danger, you put aside those laws and you save that person's life. You do whatever it takes to save his life, even by not fulfilling the laws of Shabbat. Shabbat is very important. Yeah, but human life comes first. So that is ingrained in Judaism very, very much. Human life is very, very precious. But wait a minute. Okay, human life is very precious to understand, but even if somebody who's comatose, you know what that means? Almost like in a vegetative state. Doesn't move a finger. And the answer is yes, even somebody who's comatose, because no matter how much of an expert a doctor is in his field, there's not any human being that I know of in this world that knows what's going on in the soul of this individual who is in this body that's comatose right now? Does he have any level of awareness? Because we know that there are different kinds of levels of awareness. Yes, different degrees of coma. We do know that certain individuals who were in a state of semi-coma or coma did hear what people were saying to them. They weren't able to respond, perhaps, because of their disabilities. So we know that even if somebody is in a comatose state, there are various levels of awareness. So what does this tell us? That even if somebody is terminally ill, and the doctors say he's helpless, that individual is not devoid of any, in other words, his life is not devoid of any meaning. His life has meaning. What kind of meaning? The rabbis tell us that even if one only has 1 minute to stay alive, in that 1 minute he can accomplish a great deal. What can you do in 1 minute? You can do teshuvah. You can repent. Do you know that this is something that is done when someone we suspect may be dying? We go to him and help him say vidui, to confess. Confession is very, very important. It's very helpful in the afterlife. The one right before he died, he confessed. He felt sorry about what he did. He's remorseful about certain actions of the past. Very important. And if he can't say it, we say it for him. 1 minute could make a big difference. A lot of people died like this. They didn't have time to reflect. They didn't have time to say goodbye. They didn't have time to prepare a will. Every minute matters. Every minute can make a big difference. And don't forget, we never give up hope. As the rabbis tell us, even if the guillotine is about to come down, even if the guillotine is about to come down, never give up hope that God will have mercy on you and you will be taken down from the gallows. These things have happened in the past. Therefore, we never give up hope. Even though statistically it's okay to believe that this individual, more likely than not, may only have a few days or weeks to go, according to statistics. But still, it's important not to give up hope. There's a question as to the need of praying when someone is going anyway. Obviously, if somebody's in tremendous pain, he's definitely not going to be around for too long, then we don't want to pray that that pain should continue and that he should stay in this particular state. We can pray that he should recover if that is still a possibility. And we can hope for miracles because miracles occur. It even happened today. They've reported on various situations where people somehow came out of their coma in a miraculous way. It's reported. You can see it. You can read about it. This is not something that just happens once in a while. It has happened. And today, with all kinds of technology and new medication, and new discoveries, it may be possible to help people who were not being able to help years ago. People who could not see, all of a sudden they're able to see. People who could not hear, all of a sudden they're able to hear. People who could not walk, completely paralyzed, are able to walk with bionic legs. Technology is incredible in the medical field as well as in other fields of how this has helped many people who may have themselves given up hope, but we don't give up hope. People try all kinds of medication. What may not have helped this individual may help this individual. You never know. So it's important to try, important not to give up hope, and definitely not, God forbid, assist anyone or convince them. You know, just forget about it, give up, you're better off dying in a dignified manner. No, that's not the correct way to do it. A person has no right to take his life, even if he's in pain. Why not? Why shouldn't it be the right of the individual to take his life if he's in very, very much pain? If someone is in great pain, why not give him that right? There was one situation, there was a story where a doctor or his son, I don't recall if it was the doctor or the son, decided to disconnect the father, to disconnect the man from the respiratory, the machines, life support machine. And a couple days later, the doctor or the son had a dream with that individual who died. He died. He was disconnected, he died. And that dead individual came in a dream to the doctor and says, "Why did you disconnect me? I thought I was doing you a favor. You were in such great pain. You were dying anyway." He says, "You don't realize something. Every hour of pain in this world is a tremendous help in the afterlife." Judaism believes that Yisurim mechaprim, pain atones. It's not just something that you try your best to get rid of. In the end, I mean, of course, we try to heal ourselves, but if you can't, accept it. It's an atonement. It's from God. And this is better. If it's an atonement, it's better if we are cleansed down here below than if we have to go through the cleansing process upstairs. Why did you disconnect me before my time? I had a few more hours to go, a couple of days more to go, and I would have been completely clean. The story goes on that this doctor who saw this dream did teshuvah, repented, became religious. He did not believe that there's an afterlife, a soul. What does he know about souls? He thought that this body just dies and that's it, you bury it and it's gone forever. No. The essence of the human being is his soul. The body, the physical body, is just a vehicle that we use to move around in this world. And whatever happens to this individual is by design. How long he lives, how much pain he will go through, how he will die. Everything is by design. So we have no right to tamper with this life. As long as there's a spark, a living spark in a human being, we have no right to tamper with it. As the verse says in the Torah, Shem memitu mechaye. God is the one that gives life, and it's up to him when he takes it. We don't have that right to decide when we want to take it. In the end, this dilemma poses a problem to many individuals as a result of their responsibilities that they have for others, the moral consciousness that may conflict with their interest. That's why this is really a dilemma. What to do? What is the right thing to do? But unfortunately, people are not going to decide on what their moral consciousness tells them so easily, especially in our generation. And in order to understand why this is so, why they are likely, many of them, to decide on just letting this person die, I think we can understand this kind of mentality through a certain symptom that existed during the Second Temple era. During the Second Temple era, the rabbis relate to us that there were two Kohanim, two priests, that had a race who would get to the altar first and have the privilege of doing the job, of taking care of the sacrifice or whatever it was. They both ran. And one saw that the other one was going to win. He took out a knife, he stabbed him. Could you believe that? One priest took out a knife to stop the other individual. He stabbed him. He killed him. The story doesn't end there. The father of the priest that was dying approached the son, took the knife, and said, this knife has not become defiled yet, has not become unclean, because his son was still alive. He had not died yet. He was dying. But what was his reaction? The knife has not become defiled. And the rabbis tell us, well, what kind of a reaction is that? He's not concerned more about his son, he's concerned more about the knife? Is it because the purity of the vessels of the temple was so important to them? Or is it because life was cheap to them in their eyes in those days? Which one is it? Is it because they were so concerned about the purity of the vessels? Or is it because life was cheap? And that is why the father reacted the way he did. And the conclusion is, life was cheap. Because life was cheap to them, they didn't think it was such a big deal if somebody died. They didn't react in a way that was, wow, how could this happen? They weren't shocked. They weren't as disturbed by something like this. Now you tell me, how many people today are disturbed when they hear in the news, another 30 people got killed in some explosion. Another 10 people died here. Person was run over here. Lightning struck there. And in this battle or in this war, thousands of people were killed. How many people today, upon hearing or following the news, are really bothered by it? Not too many. People have lost the sensitivity. It happens so much. Life has become cheap. Not enough is being done to stop this carnage. Why not? You can do something about it. The powerful countries have it within their means to put a stop to all this. Why don't they try harder? They can do it if they really wanted to. It's not worth it for them. It's not in their interest to do it for some reason. It's not in your interest to stop human suffering? To stop all this killing? That's not, what is in your interest? Oil. Something else, not life. It's obvious. It's black and white. Human life is not as precious as other things in life to many, many people these days. Just like then, throughout the ages, throughout history. And that is where you see, that is the test of what is important and what is not, what is a priority and what is not. What do you get from all of this? What we see from this is that priorities are completely distorted today. People have the wrong priorities. Life is no longer a priority. And that is why people are thinking about legalizing this, legalizing euthanasia. Just go ahead with it. Let's put together the rules. Let's decide on when yes and when not, without any regard to how slippery the slope can get eventually. Because that's one of the problems that will occur. That even though we may want to say that in certain situations passive euthanasia may be acceptable, but it's a very slippery slope. Especially in the times that we're living today. Yeah. Many examples where hospitals, doctors all over the world did not do their best to try to save a person's life. And what did the family come and say? Oh, malpractice. Was it malpractice? It's sometimes very difficult to prove. The doctor says he did do his best. In his opinion, that's what needed to be done. Are you sure? Would you have done the same if it would have been your son? See? It's not so simple. In Judaism, there is a concept called chesed shel emet. Chesed shel emet means kindness with truth, or true kindness. And this particular term or this concept is used most of the time when one is accompanying the deceased. One is attending a funeral and going along with the people to give one's last respects to this individual who recently passed away. Why is that called a chesed shel emet, a kindness of truth? Because we're not expecting any favor in return. When people are kind to each other, sometimes they do so because they're expecting something in return. You were kind to him, you did him a favor, he will return one day the favor. You need to be kind to others. When you are kind to a deceased, when you accompany him on his last journey, yeah, when you go, and especially if you help out in the burial, without anticipating any compensation for this, that's a chesed shel emet. I would like to extend this concept and say that chesed shel emet applies also to individuals who are sick, who are ill, seriously ill, terminally ill. That if one goes out of his way to be there for them, to visit them, to help them, whether a friend or a doctor, regardless of your capacity, if you can be of a help to them, you're doing a chesed shel emet. You have no idea of how much you're helping them. As a doctor, you have to try your best. You have to consult with others. Perhaps you don't know the answers to everything. As a family member, as a friend, it's important, it's a mitzvah, it's a good deed to visit the sick, as long as, of course, the family agrees to this, depending on his situation. To be there, to talk to them, to hear what they have to say. This is a real chesed. It's a big mitzvah. It's a beautiful deed. Not to minimize the fact that he's terminally ill, that's it, he's going to be gone anyway. On the contrary, to give him hope, to elevate the spirits, to do whatever it is that we can. You may reach a point where there's nothing you can do anymore. Fine. But hopefully you've done everything you can until then. Therefore, in conclusion, I really believe the way I see this whole situation is that when a person is terminally ill or in tremendous pain, and we should never know of this, because it is really a very difficult situation for everyone involved. But whenever this does happen, and we're facing this as a doctor or as a family member or as a friend, look at this as a nisayon. This is a challenge from above. Not so much that a challenge for the individual who's about to die. For him, yes. If he's still awake and aware, for him it's a challenge on how he takes the pain. If he accepts it or not. If he's okay about it. Or if he's very, very upset at God or not. I mean, for a sick person, it's always going to be a challenge how he relates to this. But I'm talking about the people who are observing him, the people who are there that can help him. It is a tremendous challenge for them, how they deal with it. I see this, therefore, these kinds of situations as presenting a challenge to society, to hospitals, to doctors, and to family members. Now is your chance to prove it if you're kind. Not by letting him go. That's not how you're going to prove it. Not by giving up hope. And definitely not by facilitating or helping him die early. Now is your chance to prove if you really care about him in the way that you will go out of your way to help him. You will do whatever you can to alleviate his pain. You will do whatever you can, if still possible, to help him recover. And most important of all, let's see if you continue to pray for him. That's not something that everybody does. And it doesn't take that much effort. You know, we may not be able to help the individual physically, We may not be able to help him with medication. We may not be able to heal him. But we can pray. What does it take to pray? Right, remember the story of Penina and Hannah? Hannah is the one that gave birth to Shemuel. She did not have children for a long time. Penina had many children. And the rabbis tell us that Penina lost her children because she teased Hannah for not having children. And the question is, but wait a minute. The reason she was teasing her was because she wanted her to pray. Penina wanted Hannah to pray that she should have children, that perhaps she wasn't praying enough. Why was she punished? I believe every time Hannah had a child, Penina buried the child. Talk about here the two wives of Elkanah. Penina is righteous, Hannah is righteous. Why did Penina deserve this kind of a punishment? Maybe she meant good. She meant good, and she did. So the way I explain it is, yes, if you really mean good, then why didn't you pray for her? Don't tease. Don't tease and come back and say, well, I meant good. I was really trying to help her. The best way you could have helped her is by praying for her. You should have prayed for her instead of expecting her to pray. Of course you should pray. When we see a situation where we can be of some help, we need to help. Whether it's financially, whether it's emotionally, whether it's medically, however it is. Each one according to his capacity as a doctor or as a family member or as a friend. We all need to do what we can. We don't give up. And we don't assume that this is what's best for him. What's best for him is that he live. Life is precious. Every moment is precious. That's always better. But he's suffering. Even the suffering has some benefit. We just don't know of it. We're not educated enough to realize what this does for the individual in the afterlife. Obviously, we don't have to go out of our way to prolong his pain. But whatever we can do to assist an individual, even if he just has a few hours left, can make such a big difference. It's a mitzvah. It's an act of chesed. It's an act of kindness. And regardless of whether our efforts help or not, one should always pray. Pray to God to help this individual however he sees fit. That kind of a prayer, hopefully, will definitely be heard. You know, we don't know what the plan is, the ultimate plan and the ultimate design of God is for every individual. We have no idea. We know of situations where people were sick and came out of bed. We know of situations where people were very healthy and they didn't wake up the next morning. What do we know? We do not know how much time a person has to live in this world. Only God knows. So we can't play around with this life. We don't have title to this life. Not to our life and definitely not to somebody else's life. So giving up hope is wrong. Standing by and not doing anything is wrong. What is expected of us in this kind of a situation, whenever it presents itself, what it means is that we are being challenged and we're being tested. How much do you really care? How sensitive are you to another individual's life? Let's see you in action. Therefore, all the cases that we have today, that's what they are. They are challenges to the doctors and to family members. Let's see how kind you are. And don't tell me about being kind because you're going to let him go. No, that's easy. To let somebody go is very easy. Kindness will be tested in how much you went out of your way to help. And yes, a doctor can also pray. Even though all he is a doctor and he prescribes medication, people are not numbers, even though they're being treated as numbers. We're talking about human beings. Don't treat him any differently than you would your own son, your own father. Remember, you're being tested by God. You're being challenged. this individual may still come out alive. Your efforts may make a big difference. Therefore, do your best. And God willing, if we do our best, the doctor, remember, is a messenger. But this messenger, along with all our prayers, hopefully, we will merit to have God's assistance as well. A Jew never forgets that God is the ultimate decider on whether an individual will come out alive or not, whether he will recover. The doctor is a messenger to whom we are grateful for all his efforts, and we're very thankful if he did his job. But ultimately, the one who decides and determines when a person leaves this world, the exact moment, is God. So we have it in our prayer books to continuously pray. Refa'enu Hashem v'nerafeh. God, please help us recover. Why do we ask God for recovery? So the Zohar, I believe, explains, because if a doctor heals you, the sickness can come back. Refa'enu Hashem v'nerafeh. If the cure comes from God, then it will be permanent. We will recover completely. So that is what we're asking for. We want to recover completely, and even better than that, we never want to get sick to begin with. So even if you're healthy, we pray that we should never get sick. The prayer is not only intended for the sick, it's intended for those who are healthy, that they should never become sick. But regardless of the situation, whether it's a surgery or whether somebody's terminally ill, as the doctors claim, never give up hope. And remember, a prayer can also make a tremendous difference. Amen.